Most Westerners secretly feel it. The hunger, the yearning for initiation. The sense that something very important is missing from modern life. And eventually, that hunger drives people east. To India, to the ashrams, seeking for a guru, studying the divine science of yoga, or to Tibet, to the monasteries, seeking for the enlightenment of the Buddha, studying the science of meditation. And it drives people to the Amazon, to the shamans, to the medicine. Because somewhere deep down, Westerners have absorbed the idea that the West has no living mystery tradition anymore, no real initiatic path, no living shamanism, no true esoteric lineage. But what if that isn't true? What if the real Western mystery school never disappeared at all? What if it simply learned how to become invisible? Because I'm going to tell you something strange. Western civilization very much has a living initiatic tradition. And it has had one continuously since the Renaissance, but almost nobody recognizes it. Because it never stays in one place long enough to be captured. That's the secret. People imagine mystery schools as temples, hidden monasteries, secret lodges, hooded societies meeting underground. But the real Western mystery school doesn't operate like that. It moves, it shapeshifts, it reincarnates itself into history. And every century, it returns in a new form, wearing a different mask. This is what esotericists call the Rosicrucian impulse. Not merely an organization, not a club, not a building, an impulse. An invisible current moving underneath Western civilization itself. And according to the deeper esoteric tradition, this current periodically incarnates with particular force in certain individuals. Certain initiates emerge at key moments, carrying an updated form of this current, particularly suited for a new age, a new culture, a new time. That's why the true mystery school can never fully fossilize into an institution. The moment you freeze it into a fixed organization, the living, breathing impulse begins to flee. And this is where things become fascinating. Because every time this current reappears, it adapts itself to the civilization, to the culture that surrounds it. It speaks the language of the age. It absorbs the psychology of the era, integrates the new discoveries of the time. It enters history wearing contemporary clothes. In one century, it appears clothed in alchemy. In another, Christian mysticism. In another, Hermetic science. In another, psychology of the unconscious. And each time, people mistake the outer shell for the thing itself. But the shell is never the real mystery school. The living current is. And that's why so many Western seekers become disillusioned when they encounter modern esoteric organizations. They're looking for the living spirit of the current. And they become disillusioned when they find the outer shell. They walk into a lodge or a fellowship expecting to find an initiation. And instead, they find fossils, preserved symbols, preserved knowledge, from previous centuries, like spiritual museums, fragments, echoes, bones. But the real current has already moved on. And according to this perspective, it has always moved on. Take Rudolf Steiner, for example. Rudolf Steiner. Steiner never simply repeated the old Rosicrucianism. He evolved it. He integrated Eastern teachings, teachings of karma and reincarnation, esoteric Eastern teachings about the higher bodies, but he also integrated Christian esotericism, spiritual science, new clairvoyant research, because the impulse itself was evolving. That's the pattern. Every century, the current absorbs something new. And this is where the story suddenly becomes extremely relevant for the 21st century. Because if this initiatic current is real, then we have to ask a dangerous question. What would a modern-day mystery school need to integrate today? Not in 1920, not in the Renaissance, now, in a civilization saturated by technology, mass media, widespread psychological manipulation, algorithmic addiction, spiritual alienation and fragmentation, and what we can call a profound eruption of dark spiritual forces into the culture itself. A modern initiation system would need to prepare people for this reality. And then there's the other enormous factor, psychedelics. For almost all of human history, psychedelic substances were used, but they were used in controlled initiatic settings, in mystery schools, in shamanic lineages, restricted ceremonial use, a secret protected under penalty of death. But suddenly, in the 20th and 21st century, that wall broke wide open. Now, millions of Westerners are undergoing initiatic experiences with psychedelics outside the context of a mystery school, outside the context of a strict initiatic framework. Mushrooms, visionary flights, ego death experiences, encounters with the shadows of the unconscious, encounters with spirits, some beings of light, some beings of darkness, and one problem in particular, beings of darkness pretending to be beings of light. Outside the context of an initiatic tradition, how can we discern? And whether society understands this or not, psychedelics are transforming Western spirituality profoundly and in real time, which raises an explosive possibility. What if the next evolution of the Western mystery tradition is already emerging, not inside old lodges, but through decentralized networks, psychedelic exploration, esoteric Christianity, depth psychology, alchemy, shadow work, and new forms of shamanic initiation adapted specifically for modern Western consciousness and the conditions that we find ourselves in today. Because this is the thing many people still don't understand. Western civilization does possess a shamanic lineage, but it never looked exactly like indigenous shamanic traditions. It evolved differently. It went underground. It encoded itself in alchemy, mysticism, esoteric symbolism, secret societies, and initiatic philosophy. And now, in the 21st century, something appears to be waking up again. But unlike in previous centuries, this time, the conditions are radically different. The modern initiate isn't facing medieval superstition. They're facing mass psychological warfare, digital hypnosis, spiritual disorientation, full-fledged chaos magic, artificial systems competing for human consciousness itself, new technologies finding ways to entrance and manipulate human consciousness. The human soul itself is under attack, which means initiation today cannot simply repeat the past. It must evolve beyond it. And that may be the real meaning of the invisible college. Not a fixed institution, but a living spiritual intelligence, a living spiritual wisdom moving through civilization, through history, continually reinventing itself, waiting for each generation to discover it again.